Senator Crapo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Geithner, again, with the others here, I appreciate your coming before us today. It's already been indicated that not a lot of detail has come out today, but it's my understanding that in the approach that you've outlined, that what's being discussed is the FDIC and the Federal Reserve Board providing basically debt financing to allow private participants to make bids on troubled assets. And that there's a lot of speculation, frankly, that the Federal Reserve Board would write some kind of a put option to truncate losses, allowing those who did purchase these assets to put them back at some price or at some point in the market. Is that a fair assessment of how Treasury is approaching this?
No, that is not part of this proposal. It is true that in a number of specific circumstances to date, as an effort to stabilize our system, the Treasury and the Federal Reserve and the FDIC have taken steps to help limit losses, cap losses on a designated pool of assets in some institutions. Those are things you want to do rarely. They're hard to do carefully and right. If we think there's a compelling case to do that again, then we'll consider whether to do that again. But this proposal, which is designed to bring government financing in alongside private capitalism, government capital, will not have as part of it that type of guarantee type solution.
So there would not be any aspect of a federal guarantee of the asset purchase?
Not as we envision it in this proposal. In fact, part of the virtue of this proposal, again, is to try to bring a structure that allows a market mechanism to help catalyze market solutions to clean up these legacy assets.
Well, one of the concerns, I guess this may address one of the concerns I have, but please help me answer this. And getting back to the valuation issues that a number have raised, one of the concerns I have is how will the price be determined? Everybody's worried about that. If we have some kind of a guarantee or some kind of a put option, then obviously there's a question there as to whether the federal government is basically subsidizing a higher purchase price than is appropriate. But would simply the financing that you're talking about, do you believe that that would have an impact on the purchase price in terms of the federal government being involved in some way of subsidizing the price?
Well, I wouldn't think of it quite as a subsidy. I think you're absolutely right. In a solution where the government is either purchasing or providing insurance or capping losses on a portfolio of assets, then you're acutely vulnerable to the risk that the government is taking risks it can't understand, cannot manage, may get wrong, may end up providing a level of subsidy to the institute that is not appropriate. We're trying to avoid that risk by using this kind of structure. And again, by providing financing alongside private capital with private asset managers, we think we're going to likely to put ourselves in a better position to avoid that risk. Very important to try to avoid that risk.
I've listened very carefully to your answers to 3 or 4 different senators today about valuation. And frankly, I still don't quite understand. Let's assume that there's a private entity who's going to get some federal financing in order to purchase the troubled asset. Today, those private entities are not purchasing the assets because they can't figure out what the price is. How is the federal financing going to assist? How is this process of price identification going to work?
Right. Part of the problem why you don't see that happening, you don't see private capital coming to work in these markets now, is because of the absence of financing on appropriate terms to do that. That's one of the reasons. There's other reasons too, including the sort of deep uncertainty people face about what the path of the economy is, what's going to happen to those losses. But one of the important reasons you don't see that happening now and you see private capital holding back is because of the absence of this financing. So we believe there is a very strong case in the interest of protecting the taxpayer from risks and help solving this thing more quickly to try to design something that helps solve that problem, again, with this mix of financing. Now, in that case, in a sense, it's the private investors that are making choices about valuation, but they're doing so with the knowledge that there's a structure that provides longer-term financing. And that changes how you look at the kind of return you need to get in these assets. Now, that's a structure that is widely present in alternative forms across markets. It can be done in lots of different ways, but it's not a novel structure. The novelty in this idea is that it gets us a way we think will better leverage private capital, use our resources more carefully, and protect the government against the risk that we end up, again, taking risks we don't understand, where we are vulnerable to having substantially overpaid for those assets.
So if I understand you correctly, you're stating that you believe that the reason there's really not a market now for these assets is more a lack of financing as opposed to a lack of ability to determine value.
I think that is central to the process. It's not the only thing. So these things reinforce each other. Your colleague asked me earlier today, which is this about capital or about liquidity, and I said it's about both. Because again, it's in some sense a broad shortage of capital that is constraining the availability of financing. And that's feeding on the shortage of capital, and again, making it less likely people come in and put capital to work in this. So I think our hope is that we can, by providing a source of carefully designed capital and financing mobilized this way, that we can help arrest that process. But, you know, it's not going to provide the decisive, clean, swift solution to this, but we think it'll help.
Thank you. Let me shift very quickly. I got a lot of questions, but I just have time for maybe one more. As you and I have discussed privately, I'm one who thinks you made the right decision in expanding the reach of the term asset-backed securities loan facility to include commercial mortgage-backed securities. I'm interested in the proposal that you outlined today. If I understand it correctly, you've dramatically increased the leverage that is going to be provided for those funds. Could you tell me how you've done that and what you propose to do there?
We do not intend to necessarily change the basic economics of the leverage. As the way the proposal was initially designed, there was roughly $20 billion of capital from the Treasury in support of total financing in the range of $200 billion. That was a carefully designed process with a mix of haircuts and other terms that, again, were carefully designed to, again, protect the risk both to the Fed and the Treasury. So, of course, we're going to look at that carefully along with the Fed as we move to expand it both in size and scope, and we'll have to revisit that mix. But again, we want to have a mix that works from the interest of not just the Federal Reserve but the broader taxpayer. But we're not proposing to substantially expand the leverage in that now.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator, very much.